The summer of 1914 was a powder keg in Europe, a continent teetering on the edge of disaster. The air was thick with tension, as if everyone sensed that something monumental was about to happen. For decades, alliances and rivalries had simmered beneath the surface, creating a tangled web of obligations and animosities. The great powers of Europe, Britain, France, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Russia, and others were locked in a delicate balance, each wary of the other's ambitions. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo on June 28th was the spark that set everything ablaze. The world watched in shock as news of the murder spread, but few realized just how quickly events would spiral out of control. Austria-Hungary, seeking to assert its power and punish Serbia, declared war just weeks later. Russia, bound by ties of Slavic brotherhood and its own strategic interests, mobilized to defend Serbia, setting off alarm bells across Europe. Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, declared war on Russia and France, then invaded Belgium in a bold move to outflank French defenses. Britain, honoring its commitment to Belgian neutrality and wary of German dominance, entered the war, transforming a regional conflict into a global catastrophe. The Great War had begun. Newspapers blared headlines and crowds gathered in city squares, swept up in a wave of patriotic fervor and uncertainty. Millions of young men rushed to enlist, swept up by dreams of adventure and glory. Most believed the war would be over by Christmas, a brief and heroic campaign. But no one foresaw the 4 years of industrial slaughter that lay ahead, years that would devastate families, cities, and entire nations. Europe's leaders, clinging to old ideas of honor and glory, made catastrophic miscalculations. They failed to grasp the scale and horror of the war they were unleashing. They underestimated the destructive power of modern weapons, machine guns, artillery, and rapid-fire rifles, tools of war that would turn battlefields into slaughterhouses. The First Battle of the Marne, just weeks after war began, would shatter hopes for a quick victory. Here, the true face of modern warfare was revealed. Germany's plan for a swift win collided with the Allies' desperate defense. The armies dug in, and the war ground to a halt. The battle would stretch across hundreds of miles, halting the initial German advance and marking the beginning of trench warfare. On the banks of the Marne, the illusion of a short war died. Soldiers faced exhaustion, mud, and terror, realizing the conflict would be long and merciless. The conflict's true brutal nature was revealed in shattered bodies, ruined landscapes, and the endless rows of makeshift graves. The fate of Europe would be decided not by a single blow, but by a grinding, relentless struggle. One that would test the endurance and spirit of entire nations. The world would never be the same. The war's legacy would haunt generations, reshaping borders, societies, and the very way humanity understood conflict. In the summer of 1914, Germany found itself trapped in a nightmare scenario: war on two fronts. To the east, the vast Russian Empire was mobilizing its enormous armies, threatening Germany's borders with sheer numbers and determination. Meanwhile, in the west, France stood ready, its soldiers entrenched and prepared for a bitter fight. The German High Command knew that fighting both powers at once would be disastrous. Their answer was the Schlieffen Plan, a daring and meticulously crafted strategy named after its architect, Count Alfred von Schlieffen. The plan was a bold gamble: defeat France swiftly within weeks before Russia could fully mobilize its forces and threaten the Eastern Front. The plan called for a massive, sweeping movement of German troops through neutral Belgium and northern France, bypassing the heavily fortified Franco-German border. The goal was to encircle Paris, crush French resistance, and force a quick surrender. Over 1 million German soldiers surged across Belgium, overwhelming the outnumbered defenders. The speed and ferocity of the invasion shocked the world and galvanized the Allies into action. By late August, German forces were closing in on Paris, seemingly unstoppable as they advanced deeper into French territory. Panic spread through the French capital as the enemy drew near, but the rapid advance came at a heavy cost. German troops marched for days with little rest, and their supply lines stretched dangerously thin. Food, ammunition, and medical supplies lagged far behind the front. Commanders, often far from the front lines, struggled to keep up with the chaos and confusion of a fast-moving campaign. Communication broke down and orders were delayed or misunderstood. Then, unexpectedly, German High Command made a fateful decision: Fearing the growing Russian threat in the east, they weakened their crucial right wing by sending divisions to face Russia, diluting their strength in France at a critical moment. These seemingly small changes, combined with mounting logistical strains, exposed cracks in the German war machine. Exhaustion, hunger, and confusion began to take their toll. Meanwhile, the Allies, battered, bloodied, but unbroken, were regrouping. French and British commanders searched desperately for a chance to strike back and halt the German advance. The German advance, once relentless and terrifying, began to slow. Muddy roads, exhausted men, and fierce resistance all conspired to sap their momentum. Now, with both sides exhausted and the outcome uncertain, the fate of the war hung in the balance. Every decision, every movement could tip the scales. The Schlieffen Plan's promise of a quick, decisive victory was slipping away, replaced by growing doubts and grim headlines across Europe. The stage was set for a decisive confrontation near the Marne River, a battle that would determine the future of the war and the fate of millions. Germany's gamble for a quick victory was about to face its ultimate test as commanders and soldiers alike braced for the coming storm. The outcome of the Battle of the Marne would not only decide the fate of Germany's plan, but would change the course of history itself. The first month of war was a disaster for the Allies. The French offensive into Alsace-Lorraine failed, exposing their flank. The British expeditionary force fought bravely but was forced into a grueling retreat. For 2 weeks, French and British armies fell back, exhausted and demoralized as refugees clogged the roads. Paris seemed doomed. The government fled and panic gripped the city. Commander Joffre, calm amid chaos, worked to regroup his battered forces. The British commander, Sir John French, considered withdrawing entirely. Yet, despite the retreat, the Allied armies remained intact. Joffre began shifting troops, preparing for a counterattack. The German pursuit, relentless but overextended, gave the Allies a fleeting opportunity. The fate of France and the war hung by a thread. The moment to stand and fight was fast approaching. As German armies neared Paris, Joffre prepared for a last desperate stand. He chose the River Marne as the line to halt the retreat and launch a counteroffensive. Using France's railways, he rapidly shifted troops to reinforce the threatened sector. Joffre created the French Sixth Army, positioned to strike the exposed German right flank. He convinced the British to join the attack, despite their exhaustion. On September 4th, Joffre issued his famous order, "The hour has come to advance at all costs." Morale surged as Allied troops prepared to turn and fight. On September 5th, the French Sixth Army moved out, launching the Battle of the Marne. The Allies were outnumbered, but determined. The outcome would decide the fate of Paris and the war. The miracle of the Marne was about to begin. The battle erupted as the French Sixth Army attacked the German right flank. Von Kluck, deviating from the original plan, exposed his flank to Paris. Joffre's new army struck, forcing the Germans to shift troops and opening a critical gap. The British expeditionary force advanced into this gap, threatening the German line. Desperate for reinforcements, Paris commandeered hundreds of taxis to rush soldiers to the front, a symbol of national resolve. The taxis didn't win the battle, but they inspired a nation. Allied determination and German missteps began to turn the tide. The fate of the Western Front now hung in the balance. The gap between the German First and Second Armies widened dangerously as von Kluck shifted west. The British, encouraged by reconnaissance, advanced into the breach. German commanders, plagued by poor communication, panicked as the Allies threatened their rear. Fearing encirclement, General von Bülow ordered a retreat, widening the gap further. The German High Command, exhausted and confused, sent Lieutenant Colonel Hensch to the front. Seeing chaos, Hensch authorized a general retreat. The German right wing collapsed, sealing the outcome of the battle. The Schlieffen Plan was in ruins. The German retreat from the Marne marked the end of their dream for a swift victory. What had begun as a bold and rapid advance across Belgium and northern France now turned into a desperate withdrawal. The German High Command, once confident of capturing Paris within weeks, was forced to accept that their plans had unraveled. Soldiers who thought Paris was within reach now fell back, shocked and demoralized. The exhaustion and disappointment were clear on their faces as the hope of a quick end to the war faded away. Many began to realize that the conflict would be far longer and bloodier than anyone had imagined. The Allies, too exhausted to pursue aggressively, allowed the Germans to withdraw in good order. Both sides had suffered heavy losses, and the men on the ground were pushed to their physical and mental limits. The opportunity to destroy the retreating German armies slipped away as the Allies simply lacked the strength to press on. The front stabilized along the River Ain, with both sides digging in. The landscape quickly transformed as soldiers on both sides began to fortify their positions, preparing for a new kind of warfare. The open warfare of the first month was over. The days of sweeping advances and rapid maneuvers had ended, replaced by a tense and static confrontation. The Germans chose strong defensive positions, repelling Allied attacks with deadly fire. Machine guns and artillery made any attempt to break through costly and often futile, forcing both sides to reconsider their tactics. The Battle of the Marne had saved Paris and France, but it was not a decisive blow. While the immediate threat to the French capital was lifted, the war was far from over, and the cost of victory was immense. Both armies, battered and bloodied, could neither advance nor retreat. The human toll was staggering, with thousands of casualties on both sides, and morale was shaken. Soldiers began digging trenches for protection. What started as shallow ditches soon became elaborate defensive systems, stretching for miles across the countryside. Temporary ditches soon became a vast, permanent network. These trenches would define the Western Front, shaping the lives and fates of millions of soldiers for years to come. The war of movement was dead. A new, grimmer phase had begun. The landscape was scarred by barbed wire, shell craters, and endless mud, signaling a long and brutal stalemate. The Western Front was born in mud and blood. Here, soldiers would endure unimaginable hardship as the world witnessed the dawn of modern industrialized warfare. With the front lines frozen, both sides tried to outflank each other to the north. This race to the sea saw armies extending their trenches all the way to the North Sea. Each attempt to break through was met with fierce resistance and more digging. By November, a continuous line of trenches stretched nearly 500 miles. The Western Front was now a vast, static battlefield. The dream of a quick, mobile war was dead, replaced by years of attrition. The First Battle of the Marne had saved Paris, but condemned millions to trench warfare. The First Battle of the Marne cost 500,000 casualties in just a week. The scale of suffering was unprecedented, shattering illusions of a short, glorious war. Soldiers and civilians alike were forever changed by the horror and destruction. The battle saved Paris and wrecked Germany's war plan, forcing a long two-front conflict. The miracle of the Marne became a symbol of Allied resilience and hope. It marked the end of Old World warfare and the birth of modern industrial conflict. The Marne's legacy was a war of trenches, attrition, and unimaginable loss. Leadership, flawed plans, and the endurance of ordinary soldiers shaped history. The world would never return to what it was before September 1914. The Marne was where the 20th century truly began.